All right. So I guess this is a surprise session, as Mr. Folger put it, for the panelists. We have roughly about half an hour to answer as many questions as we can from the participants today. So I'm just going to jump straight in, right? And the first question comes from Arif. He asks, why did we start our own auto industry in the first place?
Okay, maybe I can kick that off. Basically, I think it was a former Prime Minister, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. He realized that in Malaysia, before we had the national cars, what has happened is even though local assembly has started, but when we go into the ASEAN meetings, there's very little localization. There's no components, spokes and needles, tires, batteries, that's all. Whereas the other ASEAN countries have really developed local components. And I must say that the national cars have really developed the suppliers, the local component industry. You know, right now we're talking about, some cars having as high as 90% localization, some are 80, average is about 50, for those who have got volumes and all that. And the number of people that are employed in the industry, because of the fact that they have this localization process, and then we have R&D, technology, all these have spurred, investments into Malaysia. And one of the things is also Malaysia is recognized, even though we're a small country, we have our own national cars. But why it started is because we are the culprits. The people in the industry didn't want to use the local components then. We were more happy to bring in components from other parts of the world. But by having the national cars, one of the objectives was to make sure that you develop local Malaysians to produce the component parts in Malaysia. That's what I can start off with. Maybe Madani?
Yeah. I just add on. There are two industries that are key for a country to be really developed in an accelerated fashion, and also to ensure that there are technology spin-off and having that in situ technology within a country. One is power generation. The other is actually automotive industry. Surprising, yeah? It's not even aerospace. Because having an automotive industry in a country, you can have many other spin-off like aerospace, like shipping, like engineering, like design, components, electrical, rubber, plastic. Imagine in a vehicle, it consists of rubber, plastic, metal, electrical, electronics, ICU, integration, batteries. Now moving forward into battery management system, moving into smart grid. Not having an automotive industry, that country will I would say, will not be able to develop its own capability within these areas. Now that's why it is important in those days that Malaysia started, and to continue that development of this industry, and to spur this development, not only taking into consideration of our national cars, obviously they are important, but also the existing players in Malaysia who are Honda, who are Mercedes, they are already here in Malaysia. It should be really the totality of the auto industry that we should facilitate to grow, so that they actually, this industry can be an important contribution to Malaysia from standpoint of technology and also from standpoint of economy. Now, before I stop, the auto industry in Malaysia contributed to 3.2% of the total GDP. 3.2%. In terms of employment, both manufacturing and aftermarket, 800,000 people. Believe it or not, somewhat or rather, there are people around you who is involved in this industry. So it is an important industry, an industry that can spur employment. More importantly, an industry that can spur other other spin-off, for other businesses to develop around the automotive industry.
Can I add? I think it's a very simple question. My experience as a reporter, automotive reporter, I've been interviewing a lot of people, and I can say that a lot of people in this industry actually came from Proton. Proton is like Sauber, it's a training ground. So you can say anything about Proton, but why our industry is as modern as right now, is as good as right now, most probably because of the people that were trained by Proton. So even if you go to Thailand also, their vendors, some of them are actually Proton vendors. So that's why I think I look at Proton as a very good training ground. I'm also a product of Proton for 6 weeks.
I just want to add from where I come from. We can actually see that the transfer of technology. You know, in future models, a lot more will be developed here by our own local designers, and this is something that we should all be proud of. Yeah. Yes, I mean in terms of sharing of platform, in the context of Prodor, it will still be Daihatsu. There's nothing wrong with that, you know. Almost all other OEs does that. But in terms of, you know, developing design, or if I can be a little bit more specific in terms of upper body design, eventually it will be done here in Malaysia, and that's a very important milestone for us in trying to wrap that up. Thank you.
Just some input from Mr. Folger. From an outsider's perspective, how do you track our progress in terms of our work?
I think the ultimate track record will always be whether you can export your vehicles, because you need that for the quantities of scale, frankly speaking. Development, if you want to start things like this, is costing an extraordinarily high amount of money, and you need to have the volumes to support that. It's very, very simple. Yeah. I think the fact that Malaysia has set themselves that target is very admirable, because for various reasons we've known that, especially in Germany, the automotive industry is one of our main contributors as well to the overall wealth of the country. In the German industry, we are exporting now to practically all countries around the world, and extremely successfully, just as the Japanese makes do that at the moment. And I think in Malaysia, with your local brands, you have the same opportunity. It all depends how quickly can you become competitive in a larger scale, especially within the Southeast Asian circle of other countries. And that will drive forward whether you can be successful and whether this is going to be a success also in the long term. Yeah. Things like building up your workshop capacity, having also the training for the proper people. I think all these things go hand in hand with developing the overall country. So all of these things are highly applaudable. It just should not, and that's now the contrarial point maybe a little bit, because you're in that process, because you're trying to get there. We see that sometimes from our side as a little bit of a hindrance in developing the country maybe quicker and faster and more aggressively from an overall perspective, on a world perspective, for instance. Yeah, issues like Euro 4, Euro 5, which would make it very expensive, most likely, for your products, are for us the basics. I mean, we're in the meantime for our trucks, we had a Euro 5, Euro 6 standard. On the diesel side. So you can imagine that the distance becomes bigger and bigger, and so we can applaud everything that you would do from your side to become more competitive and international, because that in the end would also bring this whole country quicker up to international standards, and that's very good for Malaysia.
Right, so we'll jump to the next question. This is a very short and sweet one. Why are car taxes very high? Is there any ways that it can be reduced?
Car taxes, car taxes, yeah, are divided into three: import duties, sales tax, and excise duties. Import duties, many of countries that we are having automotive collaboration, most of it, like Japan, Australia, within ASEAN is already zero, so there's no issue of import tax. Sales tax, as I mentioned, is 10%. Don't ask why it's 10%. Probably with the VAT or GST implementation, that will replace sales tax, and we're not so sure whether it's going to be 10, whether it's going to be lower than 10%. So if it's lower than 10%, then GST is good actually for prices of cars. Okay, excise duty, can also be reduced by the manufacturer doing value-added activities in the country. So more value-added you do, for example, more you use local parts, more you even do certain research and development in Malaysia, you can also actually reduce your excise duties. So yes, so even excise duties can be reduced.
I want to add on that. This is a favorite topic of mine. In actual fact, as far as excise duties is true, you can do value-added parts, but it's not a level playing field in the sense that if you are a high-volume player, there is every opportunity for you to have local value added, and for a CBU player, there's no value added activities and all that. So if you have small volumes, there's no way that you're able to get the duties to be reduced. So there is, I think, on this subject itself, I think the government must have a look at it again to see whether excise duties, there is a possibility for that to be reduced. But as I'm told, for now, it's not possible, but maybe in the longer term, you can look at it, study it again. It should be, whatever it is, you know, it should be applicable and for everyone to enjoy it, not for some to be able to do it and others not able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, just to answer back, I mean, to that one, I do agree with you to a certain level. You see, Malaysia being a developing country, we do need actually to develop our country. So developing the country via development of vendors, having you know, having suppliers development in the country will help to actually grow the economy of Malaysia. Okay, so even automaker like Mercedes-Benz finds that it is worthwhile to do a CKD operation as compared to a CBU, because then they can actually develop the economy within in Pekan. This case would be in Pekan. Okay, so of course, obviously, you do you contribute to the economy of the region, of the country. Of course, then you will then be incentivized, because you do help the country to be prosper, the people to have jobs, for all of us to be more comfortable, to have, you know, whatever that we're having now. Okay, but then I do agree that it can't be forever like that. Okay, so we are developing. We know that Malaysia is moving into a developed nation. So as many other developed nation, then I would say we need to have something, you know, to go beyond, or not only you know, keep on sort of like giving in or putting some treatment, special treatment to the local and discredit others. You know, moving as a developed nation, then we should actually put things more on a level field.
Right. I'll move on to the next question. The question is anonymous. Is it possible to consider the policies that have been used in European regions regarding carbon emissions in Malaysia? Is the NAP able to introduce it in the automotive industry, since we are moving towards green technology?
Yeah. This the question is long, but the answer is straightforward. The NAP is using the EU as a benchmark. That's it. Carbon emission, fuel efficiency, end-of-life vehicle. I hope you will help us to propagate the importance of end-of-life vehicle. It's important, you know, end-of-life vehicle, meaning a vehicle which is no more roadworthiness, you know, cannot be running on the road, isn't it? So regardless of the number of years of the road, it can be 20 years, it can be 15 years old, we don't care. But the moment your car, even though it's a 5 years old car, if it's not more roadworthiness, it cannot remain on the road because it is dangerous for other cars. Just simply you don't care, you don't know how to take care of your car, okay, then you should be disqualified from driving that car on the road because it is not safe for others. So that's about end-of-life vehicle. So the whole NAP 2013, okay, of course, it's about EU. There's benchmark on EU, there's benchmark on Japan, there's benchmark on US. You know, it's really a global benchmarking, but the way forward is really towards a green automotive industry.
Excellent. Margaret. End-of-life vehicle takes into consideration hazardous 22-year-old car also.
Not if it's a Mercedes and it still works.